Today we're headed off to Glacier National Park in northwestern Montana, just a stone's throw from the Canadian border. This place is as wild and breathtaking as you can get. People who go there are those who like roughing it out, long trek hunters and serious campers and hikers that make use of as few modern utilities as possible. The place isn't for the weak, that's for sure. Mountain lions, black bears, grizzly bears, coyotes, wolves, even the moose, elk, and bighorn sheep have short tempers and quick hooves. Luckily, there are plenty of spaces on the outskirts of the park for those who want to experience nature without all the animals out there that consider humans nothing more than a meal. And that place would be Divine Creek Campgrounds. In the shadow of St. Mary's Mountain lies a quaint little campground, mostly frequented by day visitors, young families, and those who only have a day or two to spare for some fresh air. A river, also named St. Mary's, runs through the campgrounds, and that's where the expected safety of the Divine Creek starts going downhill. That river brings with it all of the animals from the deeper wilderness that would usually avoid the more well-beaten paths where humans congregate. Alongside the waters are thick lines of berry bushes. Now, July at Glacier National Park is peak summer season, and you know what that means for bears, don't you? It's the time that they load up on plant matter while the trees and roots are heavy with their produce. Actually, they eat so much of the berries that those who hunt bear report that the meat takes on the taste of the berries that they've been gorging on. When autumn arrives and the berry bushes stop producing fruit, the black and grizzly bears then switch over to a more protein-rich diet. Naturally, they're much more aggressive with their last-minute matings, jitteriness that comes before their upcoming hibernation, and the adrenaline that follows with actively hunting takes over. Autumn is by far the most unpredictable time for bears and humans to run across each other. But this was summer, normally a much safer time out in the woods, so Jane Ammerman and her boyfriend, Kim Eberly, couldn't have chosen a better time to go camping for the weekend. Unfortunately, this wasn't a time of cell phones, regular alerts, or quick Google searches to notify campers of dangerous encounters or concerning sightings. Or the two of them would have known about the reports around Divide Campgrounds about a male grizzly that had been rooting around, bothering hikers and campers. At first, it appeared content to rummage through coolers and tents, looking for food scraps, but it wasn't long before it came into contact with people. It stormed 2 campers, but backed down when they ran. And the second time it charged at a couple returning to their tent after a day of hiking. They were lucky enough to have their car with the keys still inside, close to them, and were able to make a quick getaway with only a few vicious claw marks on the side of their truck. Even more concerning, it killed some livestock on a nearby farm and was seen regularly entering a nearby dump site. Unfortunately, this was, and still is, tribal land. Authorities and tribal leaders were in the middle of coordinating a capture of the bear, with the intention of relocating it several hundred miles away. Rangers couldn't just shoot it without clearance from the tribal council, and both parties would much rather relocate it if they could. But for now, there was paperwork and meetings to get through before anyone could make any moves. Unfortunately, this amount of bureaucracy wasted unnecessary time. Had it not been for all of the hoops everyone needed to jump through, then this whole tragedy could have been avoided entirely. From the eyewitness accounts, the grizzly was a juvenile, weighing no more than 300 pounds. Small for a bear, sure, but still an enormous animal when compared to a human. Its younger age could explain why it was so aggressive this early in the season. Even bears can get hormonal when they go through puberty. But like I said, Kim and Jane had no idea about these reports. It was July the 23rd, 1980, and the two lovebirds chose the Divide Creek Campgrounds to spend the whole weekend at. It was a Thursday, and the two 19-year-olds had arrived that same day and chose a spot as close to the tree line as they could. The grounds were swarming with people, mostly families, and they certainly hadn't come to the sunny mountainside so that they could share their time off with scores of people they didn't know. So far, Jane was having a grand old time. She grew up on her father's knee, learning all about hunting, butchering deer, and erecting tents. But Kim was a proper city slicker. He'd only started getting into camping and nature because he wanted to impress Jane. He was making a big show of pretending to know what he was doing, but he only ended up making the job twice as long as it was supposed to. Jane humored him for a while before stepping in and showing how to do it properly. Their love-struck giggles echoed across the campgrounds and echoed back to them from the high peaks. Despite being from 2 different worlds, they just clicked, and this delightful excursion was surely going to be the first of many. They managed to get their tent up and a fire going before nightfall at least, and had a whole day of hiking planned out the next day. So they headed off to bed almost as soon as they'd eaten their hot dogs and buns. The ground slowly went darker as the lights were switched off and the silence fell gradually as children settled into their sleeping bags. Midnight came and went, and it was around 3 to 4 in the morning that the juvenile grizzly started inching its way toward the tantalizing smells still hovering around the firesides. It kept to the outskirts, quietly working its way around campfires, looking for scraps that were left out and finding nothing but a few discarded chips. When it reached the last camp, the one that belonged to Kim and Jane, there were no scraps here either, but it smelled the leftover hot dogs that they'd put into a Tupperware container and stowed in the tent with their other belongings. It pawed at the tent, trying to get in, already getting annoyed at the lean pickings. When Kim snored loudly from inside the tent, it just exploded with pent-up anger and fury at whatever thing was inside, making the noise that it perceived as a threat. Out of nowhere, Kim and Jane's tent was suddenly shaken like they were in the middle of an earthquake. Only this earthquake was growling, roaring, and tearing like nothing they'd ever heard before. Completely panicked and hysterical, Jane's screams were suddenly cut off as a murderous swipe tore through the tent and smashed into her face. The tent collapsed around them, and with Jane unconscious, the deafening roars, Kim had no sense of where he was or what was happening to them in the pitch dark. He didn't even see the next swipe coming. The animal felt its paw strike something solid and unleashed its full fury on the lump that was Kim's curled up form. It bit through the nylon and grabbed Kim by the arm, pulled him out, and flung him through the air. Kim's breath was knocked out of him when he struck the ground, but before he got it back to fill his lungs again to scream for help, the grizzly was on top of him again, and this time it could see exactly what it was aiming for. It made quick work of the young man and even started to drag him into the bushes when it heard Jane start to stir, moaning in pain. It turned back and grabbed Jane by the throat before she regained consciousness fully. The next morning, campers reported that an intoxicated couple had been fighting in the early morning hours. Unfortunately, those drunken yells were not what they thought it was at all. It was the final screams of help from Jane and Kim, only no one came to their aid. When park employees went out to give the rowdy campers a warning, they found a terrible scene. The tent was a ruined mess, covered in blood, all of the clothes and food strewn around it as the bear rifled through it. In the bushes just 20 yards away lay Jane. Her left leg was ripped off, discarded next to her, partially eaten. Her neck was torn clean out, explaining the mass amounts of blood that drenched the tent. Several yards deeper lay Kim. His face was slashed, his chest torn wide open so that his rib bones were exposed, and the bite marks out of his chest showed that the animal had eaten Kim too. Now that there was a death in the park, all of the paperwork was thrown out the window. This was out of everyone involved's hands. The bear had to be captured. Relocation was no longer an option. This was now officially a hunt for a murderer. Within 2 days, they caught 4 bears but released 3 of them. Only the 4th bear fit the description of the aggressive young male, and its entire upper body was covered in dried blood. As expected, Kim and Jane's remains were found inside of its digestive tract, proving that this bear, and this bear alone, was the one who'd served the couple with their final affliction.